All right, it looks like our technical difficulties are solved. So we're going to go ahead and try that again, just to make sure everyone can see and hear us. So for those who didn't hear the first time, I'm Erin Robinson, Director of Outreach and Strategic Campaigns at GBPI. We just heard from Danny about how we can meet this unprecedented moment when it comes to our state's prioritization of resources. And I am excited to chat with the three leaders here today from across our state to see and hear about how the state budget impacts their work. So I'm joined by Sherrell Byrd, co-founder and co-chair of SOWEGA Rising, Alicia Johnson, executive director of Step Up Savannah, and America Gruner, founder and president of Coalición de Líderes Latinos, also known as CLILA. Good morning, panelists, and thank you for your patience through our technical difficulties, but we'll start with some introductions. So could each of you tell us a bit about yourself and your organization? We'll start with Sherrell.
Hey, good morning, everyone that's joining us across the state. My name is Sherrell Byrd, and I am, as she said, the co-founder and executive director of SOWEGA Rising. We are a coalition-based nonprofit organization based in Southwest Georgia. We're laser focused on rural communities and marginalized communities in the 14 counties that make up Southwest Georgia. We were established in 2019, the year right before a COVID-19 pandemic really devastated Southwest Georgia. And so our core initiatives that we focus on as an organization are rural health, utilities and climate justice, civic engagement, historic and cultural preservation, food justice, economic justice, as well as racial equity. We do bring together a lot of partners across the region, the state, as well as nationally to help us tackle and create rural strategies for these crisis level issues in Southwest Georgia. So excited to be a part of the conversation today.
And we're so happy to have you. America, you can go next.
Yes, my name is America Gruner. I'm the founder and director of the president of the Coalición de Líderes Latinos, or CLILA, Coalition of Latino Leaders here in Northwest Georgia, based in Dalton. And we have been working in the community since 16 years ago with immigrant families, low-income families, and we advocate for ourselves, but also we organize ourselves to define the narrative and also to find solutions. So we're excited to talk about the budget today.
Thank you so much for being here. I'll throw it over to Alicia.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, Erin, and Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. My name is Alicia Johnson, and I'm the executive director here at Step Up Savannah. Step Up Savannah is a sectorial partnership that is a 501c3. We are partnered with the municipalities in our area, but our work is focused on economic inclusion and financial security programming as a poverty reduction initiative, not only locally, regionally, as well as nationally. And we are so excited to be here to have this critical conversation as we continue with our work with advocacy, policymaking, and all those important things that need to happen to solidify our social safety net in the state.
Great, so let's jump on in. Every year, main focus of Insights is the state budget, and it's easy to see what priorities emerge for the governor in the budget proposal, but could you tell us about how you see the state budget actually impacting your everyday work? We'll start with Alicia.
Hi, so our state budget is a critical, right? It's a very critical document because our budgets, our state budgets, and our federal budget should be a policy-focused, people-centered, value-driven document. And here in Georgia, we fail to meet that standard with our budget over and over again. We are serving people in our community who are asset poor, meaning they don't have even 3 months of income on hand They have no durable assets and a net worth of zero, just to subsist at a poverty level for 3 months. So without the necessary programming in our budget, we are constantly faced with helping families navigate what living in a public benefit cliff looks like for them. So there's food insecurity, there's being underbanked, not able to access credit. There's workforce issues because of the lack of transportation infrastructure or even childcare support systems in our state. And so we're working with those families every day to try to solve real life, everyday issues. And sometimes I think that those who serve us in our legislature don't realize what the everyday Georgian is facing without a state budget that supports just a minimum quality of life.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Sherrell, would you like to share how you see the state budget impacting your work?
Absolutely. So I echo everything that Ms. Johnson shared about that being a document that should reflect the values of our legislators and how they invest in parts of the state. And so one of the things that we have started to do really well is we have a very robust civic engagement program where we do a lot of issues mining to just really understand what are the challenges that people are facing in Southwest Georgia. And a part of that is making sure that people understand the importance of their vote and how that vote really is supposed to help them to be able to have the things that they need. If you vote, your vote is your investment in your legislators to bring things that you need to your communities. And so a lot of times we're out telling people, if you vote, it will change your community, it will change your way of life. It's supposed to make things better for you. But unfortunately, it makes us look a little inauthentic when we say those things and we're encouraging people to vote, and yet that vote isn't changing their day-to-day life in a way that's tangible that they can actually see. You can drive to Atlanta, for example, and see development all around you, see all sorts of things happening in terms of like economic development and housing. And Atlanta's changing by the day, which is great and it's amazing, but you don't see that in rural parts of the state. And so people are looking around them and they see crumbling infrastructures, they don't have jobs that pay a livable wage, their hospital just closed in their community. All of these things are happening and it makes them feel a little bit of apathy towards our legislative process, and that, a lot of times we hear people say my vote doesn't count. And so it's easy to say that and to see that when you're not seeing real results from your vote. And so a lot of times it really causes a burden on us that are out here working in communities and really trying to encourage people to be civically engaged. And one way to help them be civically engaged is investing in their communities, and so that they can get a return on the investment of their vote. So that's one of the ways that we're challenged day to day, is just, we want to make sure that when we tell people their vote is going to count, we want to see that happen in their communities, and they want to see that happen in a real way. And that's a way that our legislators can make sure that the budget is equitable and serving other communities outside of Metro Atlanta across the state.
Thank you so much, Sherrell. Y'all have already touched on some of the stuff we really want to dig into in some of our later questions. So I'm excited about the rest of this conversation. America, would you like to share how you see the state budget impacting your work?
Yes. Here in Dalton, the school population is about 80% Latino, and in the county is about 40-45. So that tells us that sometimes the needs of immigrants or non-English speaking population are not taken into account. So that creates a lot of issues and needs in the community. Plus, being part of a rural area, we don't have public transportation, but sometimes the schools don't have the budget to meet the needs of the students. And probably we're going to talk about this later, but also we have seen many suicides in the school. So the ratio of counselors in the school is very small compared to the population that has the needs. Plus the after school programs are not enough, and people are, parents that don't speak English don't know where to go to help their children to be at the level of their grades. So there are many issues happening that are gonna depend on the budget. Thank you.
So I think a theme that we've heard when it comes to your answers to that question was a lot about inequities. So the theme of this year's insights is equitable budgeting makes perfect sense. And a lot of times people might not think about equity when they think about the state budget. So I'd love to hear, and we can start with Sherrell, what comes to mind for you when we talk about equity and the budget?
So the first thing that comes to mind for me is a lot of times we hear our governor and our state leaders say things like, Georgia is one of the most business-friendly states. Georgia is a great state for movies. We're really growing our movie industry in the state of Georgia. But a lot of times we're not specifically talking about Georgia, we're talking about Atlanta. And so there's a rural divide. It's very stark that, again, there's lots of investment, lots of economic development, the movie industry, the businesses are booming in Metro Atlanta, but that's not quite the case in other parts of rural Georgia. And so I've actually talked to people that come here from other states expecting to move to other parts of the state and expecting to have, start businesses in those states and see those parts of the state and see those businesses thrive. But then they're a little bit shocked when they realize that outside of Atlanta, you don't have the same type of investment in businesses and support for businesses as you would see in Metro Atlanta. And so we have to make that statement that Georgia is business friendly and it's a great place to start a business. We have to make that real for all parts of the state. In order for the state to be sustainable. And I'm in a lot of conversations where people, when they talk about rural communities, it's always centered around agriculture. I've been on committees where they're like, oh, when agriculture comes up, we'll call you, Sherrell. But while we're proud of agriculture in rural communities and the fact that we really support a lot of the state's agriculture, there's so much more that's needed in rural communities for us to be sustainable. And so we need a budget that has equitable investments in growing rural businesses, bringing technology and STEM to other parts of the state, and also making sure that that movie industry does trickle down to other parts of the state. I know Savannah, for example, is starting to have a really growing and robust movie industry. You rarely see those things come to outside of Savannah or Atlanta. Every now and then you'll see movies in Columbus or Macon or Thomasville, but we want to see more of that type of economic development in other parts of the state. And so that's where the budget and our legislators can really have a win, is just making sure that when you're investing, you're not just investing in the urban part of our state, but you're really helping to see the entire state thrive. And that's how we'll have a better Georgia.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing that, Sherrell. America, what do you think about when we say equity and the budget?
Probably some of the stuff that I mentioned, that some equity I think about to provide people what they need, access to the resources. And at least here, the ratio of teachers, bilingual teachers, bicultural teachers is also very small. So it's very difficult for students or for the teachers to understand each other, and that sometimes leave children outside of the opportunities that they could have. In the statistics in the city, the test scores of English is below the state level. So that means that there is a need in there, and sometimes the budget is not enough, or is not assigned as it should be. And as I mentioned, the counselor, the transportation, and during the pandemic, there were districts around us that they didn't have the technology to have the online classes, but they were required to take the classes. So there is a disparity there, that sometimes the district that is have more money, have more resources, instead of based on the needs of the students, is based on how wealthy is the county or the district. Also, there are not enough interpreters for the different needs in the community. And for, I mentioned the mental health. And so I think there must be a mechanism to hear the needs in the community, and then to assign the budget according to that, because as Sherrell said, not everything is Atlanta. We don't have the same needs in there that South Georgia and Northwest Georgia. That needs to be taken into account to be equitable.
Thank you so much. I love that about hearing the needs of Georgians and thinking about prioritization of resources in that way. And I wanted to give Alicia the chance to answer this question as well.
Yeah, so I completely ditto and echo what Sherrell and America have said, but I think also just as a kind of a broad 50,000 foot level around our budget, Prosperity Now, which is a national organization focused on economic inclusion and racial economic inequality, ranks Georgia 45 out of 50 states on the prosperity of its citizens. And so when we think about equitable budget practices, what we should be considering is that Georgia, like most Southern states, have a history of exclusion and exploitation. And to deny that denies the right for every Georgian to have the opportunity and potential to thrive. Savannah is the third largest port in the nation. And we have a booming industry. We have trillions of dollars pouring into our area. We will soon have the Hyundai plant in a contiguous county with a $5 billion infrastructure investment. But the reality is, we also have generational persistent poverty, and 44% of households of color just in Savannah alone have are asset poor and have a net worth of zero. So to have a state budget that does not understand or does not reflect that reality it's almost mind-boggling. When we talk about what's necessary for all Georgians to prosper and to thrive. We have significant healthcare gaps, and all of those healthcare issues that we have, whether it's mental health, our behavioral health, our maternal health, is as low as some third world countries. Georgia locks up more of its citizens than some small countries. We have over 500,000 folks in jail and over 400,000 folks in under supervision. Yet we have no statewide infrastructure to support reentry servicing, when we know that, hey, joblessness and homelessness are the greatest predictors of recidivism. So we can talk about equitable budgeting on every level in Georgia. Over about 50% of Georgians are rent burdened. That means that they're spending 30% or more of their income just in housing. So we have some real issues in Georgia. And to have a legislature who's making budget decisions without that vantage point, to me, screams inequity. And that's why we have not only a surplus with all of these gaps, We don't have an earned income tax credit in our state. We don't have tax fairness. We don't have individual IDAs, individual development accounts, retirement security, or even we don't adequately protect consumers from predatory lending. And so our most vulnerable populations, those low wealth communities, the rural, and our low wealth communities of color are all targeted, and they all suffer the most. And so when I think about equitable budgeting, I think Georgia has a long way to go, and that our legislators need to be held accountable to represent the people that they were elected to represent. And for the most part, most of them are voting in a way that does not represent their constituents. We have very few of them creating policies that are people-centered and community-centered. And so when I think about equitable budgeting, I think about how far we need to go.
And of course, with all of your answers, y'all have just gotten into exactly what we wanted to talk about in this conversation. Because one of my next questions, and I think y'all have touched on this already, was about like, what are some of the pressing challenges you see in your community, and how can the state's prioritization of resources support that? So I know, Alicia, you already went into some of that, but if there was a list, because you've all laid out a lot of things that are happening in your communities, but if there's a list for you and we're talking about where you want to see the priorities focused, let us know what you want to see. And go ahead, Alicia.
Yeah, so first, I would like to even see our minimum wage raised to a livable wage, right? At least $15 an hour. The poverty rate in our community in this area of the state is about $12.32. So can we at least get up and catch up with the rest of the nation? The second thing I'd like to see is a statewide transportation infrastructure plan that supports moms and working families raising their quality of life, being able to get to school, get to work, get to a doctor's appointment, have some access to healthcare and behavioral health. I'd like to see a childcare system that supports that. Our public benefit infrastructure does not support working families. In fact, we have waivers in our state that require people to work to receive SNAP or Medicaid. And the issue with that scenario is that our childcare stipend doesn't pay friends and families to keep your child while you're working. We don't have a quality rated daycare system where the supplement can be spent. If a mother or a father who is head of household is a full-time student, they don't even get credit or recognized for that. So you want them to, and that disproportionately affects low wealth communities of color. So I'd like to see childcare infrastructure and policy amendments around our CAP stipends. I'd like to see some public benefit cliff mitigation. We have some really innovative things happening in other states where dollars are dedicated to public benefit mitigation that actually move people further into economic mobility and jumpstart that for them. The bottom line is that we leave over $1 trillion on the table when we keep people poor. It costs more to be poor. And who among us, even our governor who touts about our economy, wouldn't want to have that $1 trillion back in the economy and boosting the socioeconomic resilience of every Georgian? Because when they're attached to the economy in a real way, they're actually prospering and living and contributing. So I would like to see dollars put there. And I would also like to see dollars supporting reentry servicing, our Latino community. So I think there's a lot we can do with our budget surplus. And even without the surplus, I think we can have a values-driven budget that actually answers the problems and solutions for Georgia's issues for working families.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Alicia, for laying out that laundry list of priorities. Before I turn to Sherrell and America, I did want to remind our audience, we welcome questions from you. Please feel free to add your questions in the questions tab on Cadence. And at the end of this panel, our panelists will be answering some of those. So I will now turn to Sherrell. If you want to share some of the priorities that you want to see resources directed toward.
Yeah, I just got to applaud Alicia for really laying out the foundational groundwork for this question. And what's really evident to me is the fact that policies that are created in this state are really widening the economic gap in many regards, particularly for people in rural communities and for people that are already lower income and in poverty, for Black communities specifically. And just when you hear some of the statistics coming out of Georgia, it's really, really sad when you hear things like Georgia has some of the highest rates for Black maternal mortality in the nation. We have some of the highest energy costs in the nation. And then we have some of the highest healthcare costs that contribute to really, really high medical debt amongst people of color, particularly in rural communities. And so if I had to have a wish list, mine would certainly be healthcare and housing, because I know those are two of our major, like housing is a major social determinant of health. But it also continues to be something that continues to keep people impoverished, because as she stated, in rural communities, there's upwards of 60% of people that are renters, and they typically are at the mercy of predatory investors that come into communities and buy up properties and drive up housing costs. Leaving those people at the mercy of them not, fixing up the homes, and that then contributes to them having higher energy costs. And so, and then that contributes to them being more economically burdened by having to pay utility bills in our community that are upwards of $800 to $1,000 a month. And when your utility bill is higher than your rent, that's a problem. And so I think really addressing the state's housing issue, particularly in a post-COVID world that we're in right now, where a lot of people unfortunately lost a primary breadwinner or lost income from COVID-19 or due to COVID-19. And so that loss of income has created a kind of a trickle-down effect where people are now burdened with trying to catch up on their rent and catch up on their expenses. And so I don't think Georgia is prepared for the potential homelessness problem that we're going to have if we don't find a way to address really pre-eviction and really helping people to come out of the hole that was created by COVID. A lot of communities across Georgia do not have COVID recovery plans, are not talking about how to help their communities recover from the economic impact of COVID-19. And so we really, really need to have at the state level some focused conversations about what real COVID recovery looks like across the state. And it can't just be kind of a simple, let's just throw money at the problem. And even though we had like a huge influx of funding, and that funding was supposed to be used towards racial equity in many rural communities, that did not happen. And so we have to have a conversation about how we recover from COVID, particularly around healthcare. One of the things we saw COVID do was really highlight a lot of the vulnerabilities that we have in Georgia's healthcare system. Hospitals were really overwhelmed, and a lot of people could not handle the impact of this severe pandemic in our state. And so even during the pandemic, we saw things like hospital closures. And while a hospital closing in an urban community looks vastly different from a hospital closing in a rural community, a hospital closure in Atlanta may mean you might have to, it definitely will overwhelm other hospitals, but for the average person, that may mean a 15-minute drive in a different direction to go to the next hospital. But in rural communities, a hospital closure is devastating because hospitals are major economic drivers. They provide jobs, they provide people living in homes that are providing property taxes for communities. And so shutting down a hospital really does shut down the entire infrastructure of that community in many regards. And then it leaves behind kind of a black hole of like, there's no support services that supported that hospital. There's no specialized care. And then people are literally driving anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour to get to the nearest hospital in their communities. And so what that looks like when we talk about maternal mortality, every 15 minutes you have to drive to a hospital, you're causing further trauma to your baby if you're in labor. And so we have to have a conversation in the state about how to recover from COVID from a healthcare standpoint, how to improve our healthcare so it's not causing more economic burden and debt to people living in Georgia. And then what are we going to do about our housing situation in rural communities that have a very crumbling and outdated housing infrastructure? How do we use funding to restore and build new quality, affordable housing, but housing that's going to be energy efficient and housing that's going to put people on a path to economic recovery and closing the economic gap that we see in Georgia?
Thank you so much, Sherrell, for sharing your priorities. And we're almost through my questions, but just want y'all to know we already have questions rolling in from our audience. So America, I know you've talked about the need for interpretation, translation, support for students. Could you share more with us about where you would like to see some, what priorities you would like to see funded?
Yes, that would be a priority of attending the needs of non-speaking learners, because there are programs that are, for example, advanced programs, they don't offer them in other languages but English, and that if you don't speak English doesn't mean that you are not smart or bright. So in general would be a program to see the needs for students of other languages. But also, as Sherrell and Alicia mentioned, this is not happen in isolation. This is affected by everything. And here in our area, the housing is also a great need because there are no affordable housing. And sometimes the prices of rent are almost the same as Atlanta, while the income here is lower. And there are no spaces in the city to build more houses. So, and more and more people are coming. So that housing is a need that needs to be addressed. And also the healthcare, we help people here, but there are people that are not eligible for Medicaid, but they're not eligible even for Obamacare or any care. So they're in limbo, and there are not enough community clinics. And we have one community clinics, but it's served by volunteer doctors and nurses, that the capacity is not enough for the number of people that need to be seen. Plus, some undocumented immigrants are not eligible for any type of healthcare, so they end in the emergency room. So we need more clinics that can see people, or to expand Medicaid. Also, some programs are subject to the Board of Education caps. So they cannot spend more than that. For example, pre-K, we have a huge need for pre-K because when they enter kinder, they are not ready for that, and that turns into a snowball, because we seen children 3rd, 4th grade that they don't know how to read or write. And so it could be that the funding for the School Board of Education could be higher to expand the services for pre-K and other programs for reading and languages. And transportation is a big problem for us, and also for immigrants communities, because in Georgia, if you drive without a license is an offense, and the fourth time that you drive without a license and you get caught, it turns into a felony. But we are not eligible to get a driver license. So public transportation would be a priority for us.
Thank you so much. And I'm seeing a transportation theme coming about as well. Lots of connections when it comes to what your organizations want to prioritize. So thank you so much for what you shared today. And I know we've spent this morning's panel discussing how the state can prioritize resources, but an important part of that conversation and getting to what we want to see is also advocacy for your respective priorities. So can you take a moment to tell us more about what work your organization does to create opportunities for Georgians to engage in advocacy? So I'll start with Alicia.
Hi, so Step Up Savannah is continuously expanding our advocacy efforts. And there's a couple of ways that we do that. You can actually sign up with us to do some community and relational organizing on empowerapp.org/StepUpSavannah if you want to be a part of our network. We also do a lot of policy advocacy with our statewide and national partners, such as Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, Cover Georgia, Prosperity Now, where we're focused on people-centered policy and equitable policy making. We've organized a group of nonprofits here locally so that we can create a policy agenda that has one voice. And we will be challenging our legislators to act upon that policy agenda, but we will also be keeping report cards on them on how their policy measures against what's needed in our community. We have what we like to call our Neighborhood Leadership Academy. That's a 12-week program. It's been happening for over 12 years now, where people can come and train on how to be an advocate and become an emerging leader in their community. And we've had people leave that program. We have over 254 people who've graduated from that program, and we count them as social capital, and they help us with voter registration and voter education. But we've had some of them gone to run for public office. We encourage them to sit on local boards and become elected officials because they have the insight. So if you're interested in being a part of our policy work and our advocacy work, you can certainly reach out to us on our website at www.stepupsavannah.org. And again, you can sign up to be a part in our Empower app. That's empowerapp.org/StepUpSavannah. So we are definitely moving toward advocacy. We don't lobby because we are a 501c3 organization. And so I want to make that clear, but we do advocate for people-centered policy and particularly around economic inclusion and those things that impact low wealth communities of color across the state. So again, we have a variety of ways that you can connect with that work.
Thank you so much for sharing. America, would you like to share how CLILA supports people's advocacy?
Yes, we started CLILA in 2006, registering Latinos to vote because we think it's one of the ways that our voices can be heard. But also we have community meetings to discuss what is happening because being away from Atlanta, we don't have a newspaper or a TV station or a radio station that we can get the information. So we meet when the legislative session starts, and we discuss what bills can affect us and what we can do We have, besides the community meetings, we have, if there is an issue that is going to affect us, we start sending letters to legislators, making calls. We have a Facebook Live explaining people. We get flyers, distributed canvassing, motivating as much as we can people to participate and to let them know that that's the name of organization, because we want to tell people that everyone is a leader that has something to offer to the community. And that doesn't mean that you need to have a academic degree or money or a position to advocate for our community. And that's what we do. Calls, signatures, community meetings, and also we belong to some coalitions for immigrants' rights. And we have also visited our state legislators and federal legislators, as well as we meet with local leaders too.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Sherrell?
Yeah, so our mission as an organization is to mobilize people and resources to improve the quality of life of Southwest Georgians. And so we're always seeking partnerships, particularly with organizations and funders that are looking to invest in rural communities and to just to be able to help with the work that we're doing here in Southwest Georgia. I'm excited that there's a rise in rural investments and people really seeking to support our work in rural communities. And so we're always looking for partners, national, statewide, regional, local, that can support us in this work. Like some of the ladies mentioned, we also do a lot of civic engagement, and that's really kind of the entry point to a lot of people working with our organization in terms of like our GOTV work, voter registration, and we do a lot of issues mining where we go into communities and we talk to people, we canvass areas to just really talk to people and understand what are the issues that are they're concerned about, and how, you know, we can educate them and empower them on how that connects to their vote. And so one of the things that we do really well is empower people in rural communities. And so we do have what we call an organizing one-on-one training, where we show people how to move power and how to advocate and how to power map to understand who are the people that make the decisions that impact their day-to-day lives, and how to talk to them and advocate for the things that they need. And so that's how people can kind of learn how to join us in this advocacy work. We also have coalitions that we've created around specific issues. And so we do have a food justice coalition here in Southwest Georgia, where we really talk about food insecurity and how to create solutions around food security and move towards food liberation. We also have we're actually getting ready to launch a rural health task force that will allow grassroots organizations to come together and really start to create solutions around rural health issues. And then we've joined with some other regional organizations across rural South Georgia to create an organization called Alliance 85, where we do have meetings with stakeholders. And so if you're a community leader, if you're a political leader, or just someone that wants to learn how to do more in rural communities, we'd love to have you be a part of that table and be a part of conversations. And that's when we talk about funding and we talk about policies, because a lot of times community leaders are, for whatever reason, kind of disconnected to a lot of funding that's coming down to the state and a lot of policy decisions that are being made. And so we really encourage people to not only learn about these decisions that are being made at the state level, but to show up to those state offices and have conversations with those leaders. And so Alliance 85 gives them the opportunity to do that. And then finally, I'll say that we are embarking on what we're calling the RISE Center, which is just a Rural Innovation, Social Equity, and Entrepreneurship Center. We're in the early planning stages, but this is a great opportunity for people to connect with our organization if they want to be a part of this kind of one-of-a-kind innovation center that we're bringing to the region. It will include a commercial kitchen, it will include entrepreneurship area, as well as office space and locations for grassroots organizations that are working working in this community on the things that we're working on. And so finally, I'll say people can always connect with us on our website to learn more about the work that we're doing. That's SOWEGArising.org. And then we're also on Instagram and Facebook, where you can see in real time a lot of the work that we're doing across the region. And we'll connect people with opportunities to volunteer and work with us in Southwest Georgia. So
that sounds really exciting. Thanks so much for sharing that. So now we're going to take a few minutes to take some questions from the audience. And so the first question I have is for Alicia, and it says, can Alicia talk a little more about the public benefit mitigation she spoke of as moving people away from poverty and what some other states are doing?
Yeah, so the public benefit cliff essentially means that a person makes too much to be able to access the public benefit that is available in their state, and they make too little to have any level of quality of life. And so there's a gap there, whether it's health, food, and housing, and usually it's all three, which create quite a snowstorm for the family. Our state has not eliminated TANF or asset test for people to access that. And so when we talk about public benefit mitigation or cliff mitigation, what we need are programs that support working families to help plan their way off of the support of a public benefit, which is usually very limiting to them. For example, one of the programs that we have put in place is called a cliff calculator. We worked on it with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. And so we actually work with families to put their budget in, and we show them, if you get a job and you're going to make this much, or you go to school and this is where you're going to lose this public benefit. One of the ones that is very limiting in our state is our not only our TANF and SNAP benefit restrictions with asset testing, but it's also our child care supplement. So the child care supplement that families may receive if they qualify, and there's a special, again, an asset test for that, as well as requirements, that stipend can only be paid to a quality rated daycare in our state. Well, there isn't sufficient quality rated daycares in our state in terms of what the state has rated them by. And so and the list is so long that people can't access it in other ones. That one alone keeps moms and dads from getting to work. It's cheaper to stay home than it is to try and figure out where am I going to keep my child? Because even if I have a friendly friend or family member, a grandma or auntie that's willing to keep my child while I'm at work or at school to be able to better my life, that stipend won't even go to them to support childcare. So often in particularly, I know the rural community has this plight, just like our urban community. There isn't enough daycare network near, the lack of transportation, and so people can't even get to a daycare in time to drop their kid off to go to work. So when we talk about supports that can help working families, we're talking about including earned income taxes for an EITC benefit. We're talking about that. Those are things that help with public benefit cliff mitigation. Removing the asset test and those limiting factors that keep real people who have real lives from accessing prosperity and socioeconomic resilience in our state. And so that's a significant issue. And when we see other places, for example, our partners in Erie, our partners in Missouri, some states, even counties, have given up to $10 million for programming in the state just aimed at the public benefit cliff and helping families navigate that cliff. with workforce development supports, childcare supports, transportation supports. And so one of the things that we've done at Step Up is that we've kind of gathered some of those folks who have best practices in other states and created a learning cohort so that we can share best practices, learn what other states or counties or local municipalities are doing, and see how we can amplify and center those solutions as one that we might pay attention to, not to mention baby bonds and IDAs, which would also support public benefit cliff mitigation in our state.
Great, thank you so much, Alicia. So this question is for everyone, and we have about 5 minutes left. What advice would the panelists have for those organizations that are new to budget advocacy and are still wanting to make even a small impact on the process? And so anyone can start.
I will say just show up. One of the things I hear from our state legislators is they see a lot of corporations that show up to the state capitol lobbying and advocating for the things that they need, but they rarely see the regular citizens come to the state capitol to talk to them about their needs. And so I would say show up. There's a lot of organizations right now that are having advocacy days at the state legislature. As a matter of fact, Monday is like Maternal Health Awareness Day at the Capitol. There's a housing day coming up. There's so many days that are coming up where you will have the opportunity to be a part of a statewide conversation about these issues, and then you'll be able to be face-to-face with legislators and also see what kind of conversations they're having on the state capitol floor. You can sit in the gallery and listen to them, and that's not something you have to do on an advocacy day. Anybody can access their state capitol, and I've heard some really crazy things in rural communities where they've been told that they have to get permission from their state legislator to come to the state capitol. I'm here to tell you that's not true. That state capitol belongs to us, the people. And so it's yours to just walk through the doors and just be a part of the legislative process. And so I encourage organizations, even if you don't have like an advocacy day, to plug into larger organizations that are doing these things and having these conversations. And then there's things like, at the White House level, they have like rural conversations where there are webinars that you can attend that are virtual to learn about what is happening on the federal level to address rural issues. There's the Georgia Chamber actually has a Rural Prosperity Council that they convene to talk about rural issues as well. And so I would say plug into those types of things so that you can understand and be able to really understand the issues. And then finally, get to hear your community, like sit down, sit with your community, talk to people in your community about the issues that they're facing so that you can advocate and articulate their needs to our leaders so that they can take those needs back to the state legislator. And so I think it's more about just plugging in, having real conversations with legislators, holding those legislators accountable and not letting up. A lot of times when we vote, we think that's the end of it. We vote and then we go home, but that's just the beginning. Our vote is just the beginning. We have to continue to advocate for ourselves. We have to continue to hold those people accountable. And if they don't do what we need them to do, then you go back and vote for new people that can come and give you what you need in your community.
Absolutely. I completely agree with Sherrell. Showing up is the first way, right? Showing up and voting is the best way we can advocate from self to system. And but if you can't make it to Atlanta and you don't have the gas to get there or a ride or what have you, here's what I'm going to encourage you to do. Write a letter. Say, these are my budget priorities: transportation, childcare, whatever it is for your community. Get your entire neighborhood to sign the letter and send it priority mail for $3 to your legislator's office. And also begin the conversation at the neighborhood level, as Sherrell suggested, at our community level. Start showing up there. Show up to your school board meeting. Show up to your legislative delegation, to your business chamber meetings where your legislators go to. Make sure wherever they are, you are, and that you're having that conversation. So there's any number of ways that people can organize themselves individually or as a group that doesn't require what I call come fusses, where you just, show up and scream, but there are other ways to get attention. You can publish a letter on your Facebook and get people to sign on, and then tag your legislators in your social media. So there are a number of ways that you can advocate, again, from self-the system and start at that grassroots level, and create the momentum you need to get your legislators' attention.
Yes, for us was very difficult to travel to Atlanta or every legislative session. So what we do is to join coalitions and that they provide us information on what's going on every day in the Capitol, but also we look online. We attend the board meetings in schools or the city council, things that help us to understand, because for us it was very difficult to understand first of all the structure of the government. Then we need to put an effort and time to understand how the government functions, and to attend everywhere that you can. And also, like I said before, we couldn't travel, but we send the letters by fax to other organizations to deliver our letters to legislators. We have even gathered about 9,000 letters when something is really important for us. So there are many ways to organize, but first to get informed and join forces with other organizations and coalitions.
Wonderful. Thank all three of you so much for joining us today. That is all the time we have for this panel. I just want to thank you for joining us and for the work you do every day. And for our attendees, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then please join us for our panel with GBPI's analysts to unpack the governor's proposed budget. Thanks, everyone.